Hello and welcome. I'm your host, author Ryan M. Oliver, and this is the Mighty Books Podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Mighty Books Podcast. Today with me, I have author Steve Schlam. Steve first gained entry to the City of Words through the doors of the Public Library in Brooklyn, New York, where he was born and spent a good part of his childhood, and has maintained his residency ever since, while living in cities and towns across the United States and in Mexico. An actor as well as an author, he has performed on stages in all the places he is called home and earned a master's degree in creative writing and English under the tutelage of Joseph Heller, renowned author of Catch 22. He lives currently in Southern California in a pretty little craftsman bungalow with orange and lemon trees growing in the backyard. In the company of his wife, Leora, his first published novel, The Harvesting of Haystacks Kane, is scheduled to release in March of 2024. Steve, how are you today?
I'm okay, and it's not.
Well, thank you for coming on today. I appreciate you taking the time. Sounds like you're a little under the weather, but it's
I
like
am indeed under the weather. I apologize to everybody who's going to hear me clear my throat and all that other good stuff.
we'll take care of that. No big deal. You know what? Everyone gets sick, so no need to apologize at all. So we're here to talk about your book. I know I just said it in the bio, but if you wouldn't mind just saying the title of your upcoming launched book.
So then the name of the novel is The Harvesting of Haystacks Kane, the story of a 607-pound professional wrestler who's been gravely injured in a match with his arch rival and longtime nemesis and is lying in his hospital bed, actually two beds lashed together, immobilized and unable to speak, attempting to figure out what's happened, both in the immediate sense and over the longer course of his life, and what to do about it.
It struck me there was a book I read after I read your bio or the bio and the synopsis of the book, and kind of diving into the first chapter. It reminded me of a book, Johnny Got His Gun by Dalton Trumbo.
Trouble. Yeah.
Yeah, Dalton Trumbo. It's if for those of you who don't know, it's a World War II anti-war novel written way back in the like 1938. It was an assignment from school, from college years ago, and I remember reading it basically in essence same-ish type of situation. Individual gets shot, blown up, excuse me, by some kind of explosive, and cannot hear, speak, has no use of his arms and legs, and is basically just a vegetable living in his own mind in a bed. And reminded me a lot of that, to kind of just it torpedoed me to that book.
That's very interesting. I actually have not read that book. I
Yeah.
know of it, and I certainly know about Dalton Trumbo, who was one of the Hollywood 10 persecuted by Senator McCarthy back in the early 50s.
Oh, no
Uh,
way.
and that's a long story. There's actually a movie called Trumbo, starring I think Bryan Cranston.
Oh, wow.
But so again, I'm aware of it, but I did not know that. And the point here, I suppose, is that the action or the bulk of the action in my novel is internal. It
Hmm.
takes place in my character's mind. There are there are characters, other characters. There's a wealth of incident. It's not as though it's only thinking, although it is thinking. It is
Oh, yeah.
delving. It is attempting to determine what's happened and why and what can be done about it. In order to do that, he has to plumb his store of memories. So there is, as I say, a wealth of incident
Mhm.
that he pours over internally. And in addition, the book is kind of structured in counterpoint so that each section of Mike Haystack's own musings and thinking and remembering is counterpointed by, if there is such a word as counterpointed, by another character. And really, it's the other characters either are literally visiting him in the hospital room in which he lies, or are visiting him in his own mind. And that's something I leave the reader to decide. And so though the other characters provide more incident, more memories, and their own perspective on him, and that's how it becomes counterpointed, of course. And so that is the essential structure of the book.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I was looking through and immediately my mind, like I had a little alarms and bells going off kind of just with questions. And it seems like the theme of the story is really self-discovery, like rediscovery, really, being very self-reflective and asking kind of the big question, what's my purpose? What's been my purpose and impact? And was it worth it? Was this pain and anguish worth what I went through? It's kind of what I've at least taken from what little I've read so far.
Well, I mean, what he's trying to find is identity, authenticity, a release from the bonds of his history
Yeah,
and transformation. He is, for example, a collector, a loving collector of butterflies.
which is so fun, interested in
And
me.
of course, the butterfly is our symbol of metamorphosis and transformation.
Hmm.
And he wants very much, as part of his longing for release, he wants to go to Greece, which is to him a kind of an Eden in which he can become his true self finally and at last. And in Greece, he wants to live amongst the butterflies on the island. Well, there are, in fact, in Greece, there are several. I've been to two places in Greece myself. One on the island of Rhodes, one on the island of Paros, which are butterfly sanctuaries,
Oh,
and
cool.
for a certain kind of butterfly that will come and nest there, mate there, have its lay its eggs there, and so on. And those he seeks to find the sound of butterflies. And of course, if you think about it, there is no such thing as the sound of butterflies. Butterflies don't make any noise whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so, what he is looking for is some ineffable, profound, ineffable truth, a level of existence that we don't access in our normal lives in the everyday quotidian world that we live in. And it is a kind of transcendence that he seeks. I don't want to shape everybody's consciousness more than I have to. I think maybe I've gone a bit far here.
No,
But
you're
the
fine.
thing that that got me is when I was doing the research, and I did a whole bunch of research prior to writing the novel. There is those places that I mentioned to you in Greece are both called Petaludis, Petaloudes, Petaludis.
Hmm.
And if you take that word and you just kind of let it wash over you, it can become loud petals. And of course, loud petals are what butterfly wings are in at least in my character's mind, you know. And
Okay.
when I found that, I mean, found art is often the best. I mean, you can never make it up on your own. It's just it leaps into your consciousness and it's thrilling from a creative point of view.
Hmm.
And so I just it was a wonderful moment when I discovered that I could play that I could kind of anagram that word and make
Yeah.
it into something that he is actually looking for. So there you go.
Yeah, I like that. Well, and it's that kind of answers why butterflies a little bit there as one of my questions. But it again, the butterflies and the fact that your main character is a 607-pound broken professional wrestler reminded me of Ferdinand the Bull
Yes, that's exactly right.
and the
Very good.
flower. Oh, thank you.
I wouldn't say it was a line by line comparison
Sure.
or inspiration, but I did also have Ferdinand the Bull in my mind
Yeah.
when I was working on the novel. I
Yeah,
did.
that particular character, Ferdinand the Bull, is very, I can't say near and dear, but in my family we have a lot of larger human beings who I belong to, and but they're very kind and gentler people. So like my youngest son, he's a big boy. He's only 7, but people think he's 10. He's just a big kid, and he is the kindest, sweetest little guy you ever meet. So it's like we always sometimes will nickname him Ferdinand. Like, I'll go get Ferdinand over there. It's just because he's just so nice and kind. He likes to draw. He doesn't like to, he likes to play, but it's just
Not an aggressive kid, in other words.
no, God, no. Like aggressive is not a thing. He'll be aggressive a little with his brother, but that's his brother. I mean, whatever. That's fine. But with other people, he's very gentle, and it's just interesting. My brother, who's huge, he's 6'5", 350.
Wow.
He's a very kind guy. So it's just that's always kind of been a resonant with me. So I caught that pretty quick. I was like, I like this. This is always a good. You just see as someone who's hulking and whose profession is to beat people up, whether it be in a script or not. And his joy in life is butterflies. It's like, oh man, just kind of speaks to you a little bit.
He is, when I said one of the things he's seeking to attain at last is identity,
Hmm.
think about it, he's a big, oversized, but very gentle
Hmm.
creature, being, as was Ferdinand the Bull, who is being placed in a situation where he has to be, in essence, everything but that.
Yeah.
In fact, the opposite of that.
Yeah.
And the struggle is to return or perhaps attain for the very first time congruence with his true inner self.
Right.
And
Yeah.
if I mean that's the real wrestling match that goes on.
Yeah, that's a good leap there too. Not even a leap. That's a good mention too, is he's wrestling outside and he's wrestling inside because he's going against his identity. He's going against the grain, if you will, with his own self.
I didn't choose the novel came to me in a dream. That's a whole other part of this conversation, I
I
suppose.
was gonna ask about the inspiration.
But I did not consciously choose him to be a wrestler. He came to me as a wrestler.
Oh,
And
weird.
and then I realized somewhere along the line that yes, he's a wrestler, and he literally, I suppose, is a wrestler. That's his occupation. It's what he does for a living, and so on. But the real wrestling match, as I said, occurs
Yeah.
inter. And so, there's a bunch of symbolism. Perhaps it's obvious. I hope not. But but uh, but there's a bunch of symbolism. It's like Moby Dick, for
Mhm.
example, was a whale. But
Yes.
Moby Dick, to say Moby Dick is a whale is to say just about nothing. I like to think that my book is about wrestling. Saying that my book is about wrestling per se is like saying Moby Dick is a novel about a fish,
Yeah,
you know.
no. Mm-mm. Definitely is
Um,
not.
yeah.
Definitely is not. A relationship between the struggle and anyway.
Yeah.
Well, how long ago did you have this dream
Well,
about?
it's several years ago now. Shall I tell you a little bit about it?
Sure, go ahead.
I was living in Brooklyn, where I'm from.
Yeah.
And I was living in a rent-controlled apartment at the top of a six-story building. It was a very hot summer in New York, as it often is. Always had the three H's: hazy, hot, and humid. And I only had one air conditioner, a window unit that was in my bedroom.
Yeah.
And I woke up with a start that night, with a real start, and immediately heard voices in my head. And at first I looked around. I thought maybe somebody's here. Maybe we're being robbed or whatever.
Uh-oh.
My then wife was sleeping beside me. She didn't hear a damn thing. She slept. And all of it. And I realized, no, there's nobody here. I'm hearing voices in my head. And I thought to myself, that's it. They're going to come after me with the butterfly nets and take me away. And then I realized that it was character voices. It wasn't my own craziness. Well, all writers are crazy on some level, but
Hmm.
yeah, yeah,
I
exactly.
agree with you. I'm
Yeah,
the
yeah,
same way.
yeah. But it wasn't my own craziness. It was actually characters talking to me. And so I got up out of bed. I went out into it was a smallish apartment. I went out into the foyer where I had my desk. There was no window there. There was no air conditioning, nothing. And I sat at my desk and I immediately started writing down everything that I could remember. And the thing is that the voices kept talking. It wasn't as though, sometimes when you wake up from a dream, you have a shards of, it's like broken glass. You have shards of it still implanted in your consciousness.
Yes.
It was much more than that. It was all still rolling. It was like the tape was still rolling.
Yeah.
And so I grabbed my yellow pad and I started writing down everything I possibly could. And I was able to capture, I didn't capture all of it by any
No.
means, but I was able to capture a good bunch of it. And then I was faced with a real decision because, by this point, I probably am sitting there for a couple of hours.
Wow.
And I'm faced with a decision because I was supposed to go to work the next day. I was working at the time as a part-time. I'm trained as an attorney. Haven't practiced in many, many years now.
Sure. Yeah.
And in those days I was still practicing with a small firm, and I had a part-time lawyer job, which believe me, you don't get. That's just like, I mean, but I got it. So
Yeah.
anyway, and I knew I had to go to work, and I thought to myself, if I continue to do this, if I continue to mine all the good, veins of gold and whatever that are in my head, I'm never going to go back to work. I knew it. I mean, I just knew it. And then the question was, and I didn't, did I have the, did I ultimately have the gumption to say, okay, I'm going to kick over all the traces and just do this and follow it wherever it leads me? And I didn't. So I wrote up whatever I could. I finally stumbled back in and slept, and I went to work the next day. And I arranged with my employer that I was able to do this because I was able either to go to work for half a day and then come back and write for half a day,
Oh, wow.
or sometimes I'd go in, let's say Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to the office, and then Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday I'd write.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
and then Sunday I would rest, like God, the
Yeah.
seventh day rested.
Right.
And so I was able to manage it in a way that, and luckily I was able to manage it in a way that most writers are not able to manage it because they don't have the luxury of working part-time, and they have families. We didn't have any kids at that point, and so they have families they have to support, and so it's a much tougher slog. So anyway, that's how it all began.
Wow. That's, what? It's funny. The more people I talk to, the more I'm finding people are getting inspired by the dreams they have.
Yeah.
It's so wild at how our brains just connect something, grab something out of the ether or whatever you want to call it. Or,
Let me give you my take on that.
yeah, sure.
I once, a long time ago, I was in school in the new school in New York, and I took a class with Marguerite. I can't remember her last name, but she was a writer who was very much a writer and teacher who was very much geared toward plumbing the subconscious.
Hmm.
And of course, if you believe Freudian theory, and theory that is fairly common in psychology and psychiatry in particular, dreams are a product of the subconscious.
Hmm.
It's been my experience that dreams and written creativity, that is writing, that isn't simply created top down. That is, I have a subject and I'm going to write something about it, but that comes from inside. That all of those dreams and that type of writing live together in the same place, and that place is the subconscious. I know
Hmm.
you have a question, and it's funny. It was one of the last ones I looked at when I right before we started. What would you tell a young writer?
Yeah.
What advice would you give to a young writer? And one of the things I wrote, I took some notes on that one because it triggered me, and is to unbar the door to your subconscious and allow yourself to dream and to daydream,
Mm.
because daydreaming, the waking dream, in a sense, writing itself is the waking dream.
Yes. It's
Uh,
my favorite kind of dream too. That's probably how I got into writing because I would just constantly daydream. I'm sitting there in class, my eyes are looking out there, but I am so not in the conversation or the class. I'm in my own little world, creating something fun for me to write later. I think a lot of writers do that.
so I think that in a way it's well, it was an accident. The accident in this process that I described was that the dream was so powerful
Yeah,
that it stayed with me when I was thrust up into consciousness.
yeah. And that
That
was
is to say,
crazy.
woken when I awakened.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, as I said earlier, all you have left are shards,
Hmm.
little fragments of bright glass that are impaled in somewhere in your consciousness.
Yeah.
And but this time I didn't. I had a whole. It was a deep, rich experience,
Yeah.
and it allowed me to kind of shape the entire structure of the novel that very evening.
That's
Now it
cool.
was a rough outline, quite
Oh, right.
obviously, you
Right.
know. And it took me a long time to shape it and shave it and mold it and reshape it and et cetera, until it became what it is now, for better or worse. But that was lucky. That was a fortunate coincidence, I will say, that I was
Yes.
able to retain the dream and convert it into something virtually instantaneously.
Yeah. That's a like I said, lucky because I've had many dreams where, like I said, kind of the shards, or I've even described it as trying to pick up water with your fingers. Like it's
Yes,
just
yeah,
you're
that's fair.
bare. Yeah, thank you. It's bare
That
like
is a
I can.
wonderful image. Wonderful image. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. It's like I can't like I can see it, but I can't like connect my brain with my mouth or my hand. I can't get it on paper. And
Mhm.
it's but there's those ones that just stick in your brain. And from what I've talked with people going, write the stories that keep coming back to you. And that's kind of what's guided me a lot with all my stories. It's just this one keeps sticking out and come back and visit me. I'm gonna give it some work, give it a little nurture, water that one a bit. So it's so crazy. When you were growing up and I saw in your bio you were growing up in New York and you found love of stories and books and in the libraries. What were you drawn to? What stories were you drawn
Oh,
to?
gee. I was a whole bunch of things. I mean, I read every Hardy Boys book. I read every Tom Swift book. I read Nancy Drew. I was gender neutral in that regard, I
Sure.
suppose. And I read, I mean, I don't know, anything that tickled my fancy. I
Yeah.
mean, and I was a bright and precocious child, I suppose. And so I used to take out, I'd go to the library, I had my library card, which I greatly treasured. And the librarians knew me, and I would come in virtually once a week,
Wow.
take out, let's say, 3 or 4 books, and I'd race through them, and I'd be back the next week to do it all over again.
Oh, cool.
I particularly liked fiction. I always was drawn to fiction because it triggers that very dreamlike state.
It does.
Because and that's what I try to do in the novel as well, my own novel, is to take the reader on a trip on the river of words to a place beyond the literal meanings of those words. A
Hmm.
place, it's the place that good music takes you to. It's the
Yes.
place that poetry can take you to.
Hmm.
It's a place of transcendence in a way.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that state of transcendence is is what they used to call a peak experience and worth everything
Hmm.
because it is how shall I say, it is an annealing experience. It promotes wholeness in us of a very, very high, of a very high order.
Hmm.
I mean, I used to read all these books and it just would take me away.
Hmm.
And it's not that my life was so terrible as a child. It wasn't. I was a kid in New York. I played ball on the street. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I was very, as I said, I was bright and precocious, and so I was always at the top of my classes, and they always had to find extra things for me to do so I wouldn't make trouble, which I was also very good at. Uh, but I mean, it was not simply escape. It was more than escape. It was, I mean, if I look at it in retrospect, it was a part of the process of opening up and firming up that pathway to my own
Yeah.
creativity, imagination, and so on. That's why books are wonderful.
They are. And I think to me, it's a form of meditation almost. I'm
Yes,
not really into the, sit on a yoga mat and meditate kind of guy. I'm more like, close my eyes for 20 minutes and just try not to think of the world for a little while or focus on me. But the book is great because you're in a great story and that kind of, I'm going to say that liminal state of consciousness there where
yes,
between
yes.
you're, whatever you're experiencing. But like, when you close it or you put it away for a second and you kind of have to take a breath and go, okay, now I'm back in my body now. Now
Yes,
I'm,
yes,
I'm,
yes, sure.
yeah, that's I love when you feel that. And I love it when I write more because I'll sit there and I'll be in the world that I'm creating or the scene in which I'm creating, and I can come back and look at the clock. Holy cow, I've been here for 4 hours. And it doesn't matter if I've done 2 words or 20 pages. I have it basically escaped into something else or I'm creating something else. As when we create, we feel very fulfilled. I mean, if you look at jobs and people doing certain work, people who create things, who build structures, buildings, places, organization, whatever, they are very fulfilled people.
Yep,
Yeah,
that's
very
correct.
so.
I
Yeah,
mean, just to take this a little bit further on, when I was writing the novel, I had periods where I used to say, I was like a cold fish on a white plate. I mean, there was nothing going on. And then there were other times when the words would seem to just flow out of my arm.
right.
Was not, it was as though it wasn't even me writing. It was
Yeah,
something writing through me.
yeah,
Uh, and so in those times when you leave time behind,
yeah.
you're totally in the moment. That is a totally integrative experience. You
Hmm.
are your best, most self, if I can put it.
Yes.
And when it was like that, it was better than food. It was
Yep.
better than sex. It was better than everything.
It, I 100% agree with you. It's just that I don't know what you even call it. Almost like not enlightenment, but a certain
No, it
zeroing
is
out.
enlightenment. It is. That's a very good word for it. It
It,
is being in an enlightened state.
yeah, I'm at a calibrated zero, if that makes any sense. I'm neither high nor low. I am just existing through pushing myself through whatever this is and just enjoying
Right.
the moment. And it's everything. I'm not thinking of anything else but this. My mind is completely focused on the task at hand. And I my fingers just go. I don't even think about doing things wrong or right, or maybe that sounds weird. There's no questioning there. It's all
I,
instinct.
I, I, I actually wrote my novel by hand.
Oh, really? Oh my
I mean, it was
gosh.
a while ago, and computers it wasn't as easy as it is now. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And also the experience of writing on a keyboard versus the experience of writing with your own digits, your own hand,
Hmm.
fingers, are two very different experiences.
Yeah, I agree. I still do a
Find
little bit too.
I find the keyboard experience to be cooler, more distant,
Okay.
more cerebral, whereas writing, I once wrote, I shouldn't even say this, but I will. I once wrote a soliloquy for my one of my characters,
Mm-hmm.
who was Haystack's ex-wife, Shirley. It happened to have sexual content in it.
Sure.
It wasn't porno or anything, but it was my tribute in a sense to Joyce's Molly Bloom soliloquy.
Yeah. It was
Uh,
intimate.
it was intimate. Yes, it
Yeah.
was. That's a good way to say it. And I wrote like 1,500 words in like a half an hour or some ridiculous time frame because it was just so the experience was so intense. It was physical in nature. I could
Yeah.
feel, and again, I could feel the words coming out of my arm, and
Right.
part of me was just sitting there, kind of with my head, resting on my upturned fist, and just watching the whole thing happen.
Yeah.
But so the experience of handwriting, writing by hand, is a much more, I find, have always found, is a much
Yeah.
more intense and full experience as opposed
Interesting.
to writing on keyboard.
Interesting. Because because I grew up with computers, learning how to write on computers. But when I was younger, I want to say sixth grade, fifth grade, going on to eighth and ninth grade, everything had to be handwritten, which, in class, which is fine. And I learned poetry pretty young. Poetry, I cannot write poetry on the computer.
Yeah,
It has
not
to be
surprised.
handwritten.
I'm not surprised.
I
Yeah,
have to write it there because especially when you're doing syllabic counting or iambic pentameter, you need to have that organic ability to go, that word doesn't work. No, that doesn't work. I like the framework, but I don't like this. And you circle and cross out and do all these weird things you
right.
just
That's right.
instinctually
That's
do.
right.
So, because that I totally
That's the way
agree.
I wrote my novel,
Yeah.
Ryan.
When I do my, that's incredibly impressive. When I do my outlines and I'm developing the story, the crux of the story, it's in a notebook. It's with a pen or a pencil. Besides that, because my handwriting is deplorable, I won't lie. My handwriting sucks.
Most
But
people, most people says, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So writing my note taking, I can read my handwriting, but a lot of people can't. Writing on a computer is almost imperative so that I can understand what I said.
Sure,
So
sure.
yeah, it's a good
I
blend.
was just when I was looking over my notes on the questions that you had given me as possible talking points. I had written scribbled notes, and for the life of me, I couldn't understand some of it. I mean, I thought to myself, what language is this guy writing in? You know?
I Greek maybe, who knows? Who cares? Ancient Sumerian, who knows?
Yes, something like
Yeah, Sanskrit, I don't care. That's whatever. Well, as long as you can read it, that's all that matters, right? Or if you can't read it, it's lost to the world. So I saw in your bio, you said you had learned from Joseph Heller, the author of Catch 22.
that.
I Catch 22 has been on my to be read list for quite a while. I haven't gotten to it
Yeah,
yet.
you should read it.
But how did you, yo, I want to. But what was it like learning and meeting him and knowing him? Because
He
I know very little
was
of him.
Joe was one of the most, I mean, you would never, if you met Joe Heller and you just started talking to him, you would never think he was well, he became a world-renowned author.
Hmm.
He, I don't know if you know the story at all, but he was working for Look magazine, which is now defunct. And I don't remember doing advertising or some kind of copywriting or some damn thing.
Sure.
And he was a World War II vet, and he submitted the manuscript of Catch 22, which was originally called Catch 18, but there was another novel out by Leon Uris called Mila 18, and so he had to change it. Anyway, and he
Funny.
submitted it 60 times to 60 different publishers before somebody picked up on it. And of course, now it is Catch 22 is part of the English language,
It
which is
is.
a pretty good trick, you know.
Mhm.
But anyway, he was a you would never think of him as a world-renowned author. He was a very down-to-earth, plain-spoken guy with a thick New York accent. He had a bunch of guys that he knew. I think he grew up in Coney Island or something like that, and he
Sure.
had a bunch of friends that he carried with him all through his whole life. Then they would hang out together. After class, the program was at the creative writing program that I was in, the master's program, was at City University, City College, CCNY, up in Harlem. And afterwards, a bunch of us from the class would go to his apartment. I think he lived in the building right next door to where John Lennon was killed in Dakota.
Oh, wow.
And, and I think it's been a while. I don't.
Sure.
I moved from New York a while ago, so I
Yeah,
don't. My memory of New York is, and anyway, New York is like an amoeba. It changes every day. You know.
that's a fact.
And we'd go to his apartment, and he would, he'd give us beer and soda, and we talk writing, and we talk every other thing under the sun. And he was very supportive, very supportive. I wouldn't say what he gave me was a lot of intellectual refinement, either from his end or about my own work.
Mhm.
He once told me I wrote better than he did. Which was, I mean, for somebody who was, kind of feeling his way,
Mhm.
it was a wonderful compliment. I
Yeah,
mean,
what
I
high praise.
probably blushed.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, you're like, how do I take this?
yeah, right. What am I supposed to do with this?
Yeah.
What he mostly gave was he would give pointers and tips about things we would submit short pieces of work, or if anybody was working on a novel, they would submit excerpts. But mostly he gave you pointers and tips and a lot of support,
Mhm.
encouragement and support.
That's important.
The criticism he gave was never malicious. Some teachers play students against one another, uh, and that's a very destructive process. But he was not like that.
Cool.
He was a good guy. I liked
Yeah.
him quite a lot.
That's awesome. That's a neat thing that you're able to actually meet, talk with, and get to know the author of Catch 22. I mean,
I always thought I read Catch 22 a long time ago. I don't know what I would think about it now. It impressed me less when I read it the first time than his second novel, which is called Something Happened,
uh
which doesn't have nearly the
Prestige or
notoriety that the
oh,
first book
okay.
had. But it's a book that takes place in the corporate world, which Joe knew because he had worked in the publishing world. It's about a guy navigating all the anxieties of corporate life, and it's written in the first person. It's a terrific novel. I thought it was a terrific novel. I have a signed copy of it, which I make sure is properly preserved.
Oh God, I hope so.
He just was he was a very, very good guy, and I'm glad I had the experience of working with him. You know,
Yeah. Well, and I love that it's like you said before, like you said, describing him, very down to earth and nice, kind person. I have yet to meet an author that I didn't like, and I've talked to upwards of 80 people now. And everyone I've talked to has is just like that, very down to earth, usually very humble and smart, articulate, very passionate, very caring, and wants to see people succeed. I,
well, you know,
well,
Ryan, if you think about it, and you know this from your own experience, I think you sit there in isolation. It's
yeah.
not a team sport. You know, you sit there in isolation, and it's you and the four walls and your computer or a yellow pad or whatever you're working on. Maybe somebody comes in to see if you're still alive or how you're doing. And the rest of the time, it's just you and it.
Yeah,
And
that's
you can't ask anybody for help because they can't gain entrance into your mind. It's a locked system, you know? And so when somebody, and then when it's all finished, you have absolutely no idea. You may think it's good, you may think it's bad, you may think people are going to like it, you may think people are going to hate it. You don't have the faintest idea what's going to
no,
happen.
we don't know.
You want something, you want the best, of course, but you don't know whether you'll get even the worst. You don't know what's going
Yeah.
to happen.
You don't know if
And
like,
so and
yeah,
so when somebody, and like in this context that we're in together, when somebody is interested and wants to know about you and your work, there are all sorts of pent up feelings and thoughts that you really haven't had an opportunity to share
yeah,
because, the grocer and your best friend and maybe your wife or husband or whatever, or your partner, whoever you're with,
yeah,
they're not in that world necessarily. And so when somebody is like you who knows about this world
right,
and asks questions that are intelligent questions about this world,
right.
it's like, wow, so you can open up the gates that you have to keep closed. And that's a
Yeah.
very wonderful experience.
Yeah, I agree with that because I've had many, many incidences because I didn't tell my work that I was doing book stuff because I still have to the books don't make me really much money. It's I teach for a living. So it's people learn that I wrote a book and everything and they start asking questions. Well, it's always the not so integral questions like, oh, how much of this? How much of this? How much of that? Or how did you do this? This is the process questions.
Right.
And it's the process of getting it published, not necessarily how did you write it? What did you come up with? And so when you have those intellectual questions that come out, you're like, man, I actually got to think about this for a second. And it's very polite questions. And people asking, well, why even want to sit down and do that? But then you have people like who are interested in reading or writing, and they go, why did you choose this versus that? It's like, okay, now that's an interesting question.
All right.
And we go down the rabbit hole and it's fun. We'll talk for hours. And so it's interesting. You kind of get judgment from people who don't do it or don't enjoy that world. But when you have someone who has a foot in that door of the world of reading or writing, because it depends on either, it's a lot more fun. And you kind of get that passion again to talk about it. You don't feel so, kind of afraid to share. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I prefer that.
Then there's a need, I think, as human beings, apart from as writers, I mean, we all have the need to share.
Hmm.
Some people more than others. Some people
Yeah.
are more content to live inside a closed system,
Yeah.
you know. I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't think you are.
No, it's hard to let the birdie fly though. I won't lie. When book one was coming out, I felt some serious anxiety about sharing this. I had it close to the chest for like 2 decades almost before I let it fly. And I didn't need to hold on to it that long, but that's just how it worked out for me. It sounds like it was similar with your book too. Like you had a dream and then it took a while to get it out and
Yeah, it took, and it was a bumpy ride. It wasn't all smooth sailing. It wasn't
oh
all like
God no.
the first night, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
I had periods where I couldn't, as I said, I was like a cold fish on a white plate.
Yeah.
I couldn't do anything.
It,
And
it's strange. Sometimes you just have those moments of like you're like I'm not inspired. I have nothing to write down, and then all of a sudden someone kicks over the damn wall and the water's flush out. Like I got to get everything down on paper like right now.
I mean, I had periods of writer's block for a while. I mean,
Yeah,
it's not, people think, oh, I don't know, maybe they don't think, but I think they think
yeah,
that creativity just kind of flows out of you like a fountain. And there are moments when it does,
yeah.
and there are people, lucky people. I mean, I'll just pick somebody at random. You take somebody like Elton John, okay,
Mhm.
who's written so many, I don't know why I picked him, or Dylan, okay,
Sure.
who have written so many songs. I mean, it appears as though these people have the door to their subconscious wide open and fastened so that it can't close again.
Yeah.
And therefore, they have almost, it appears that they have almost unlimited access
Hmm.
to that fountain of creativity that lives inside everybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Whether that's true or not, I don't really know.
right.
I mean, if we interviewed Elton John, he might laugh in our faces and
Hmm.
say, you know what it's like for me to write a song, to sit there at the piano,
It's
or
torture.
Dylan, or
Yeah.
whoever,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah, he could be saying it's torture. Well, I saw an interview between Stephen King. The man throws out books like
yeah,
snowballs in a
really,
blizzard. I mean,
really, really.
it's ridiculous. He's just so, he gets him out there. He was talking to George R. R. Martin, author of the Game of Thrones series,
Yeah,
right? And he's like, how do you write so damn much? He's just asking. Stephen's like, well, I sit down, I write about tens of thousands of words a day or 30 pages a day. He's like, 30 pages a day. How do you, I can, if I can get
yeah.
30 words a day,
30 pages a day is about 10,000 words a day.
right?
That's unbelievable.
That's wild. Like if I, on a good day, I can throw down about 2,000 on a good day. On a bad day, I can throw down zero.
Right,
And I
right.
have more bad days than good
I mean,
days.
Hemingway, I know, or at least I read that Hemingway's goal was always, first of all, he wrote standing up, which was interesting. He wrote on a kind of a drafting
Really?
table, yeah. And second of all, his goal, what I read was that his goal was to write 500 words a day.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, I think I mean, if I could crank out, and many times I can, but if I could do that on a daily basis, you know, 500 decent words, not just throwing stuff down on paper so that I could meet my quota, you
Right.
know. I mean, that's fine. I'll do that every day of my life.
Yeah. I gave myself 500 was a bit much for me because with working full time and raising two kids and having a spouse and trying to live your life,
Having a
it's
life, in other
yeah,
words.
yeah, it's very busy. So, and I want to try to make sure everything gets the attention it deserves, including my work too. I gave my goal of a very easy to meet 100 words, and I made the bar low. 100 words of whatever words I can get down. If it is just notes and nonsensical whatever, it made the progress of the story. It's like, okay, I progressed. If I erase that 100 words tomorrow because I found a better 100 words today, that's good. It's the stepping stones to making the story better. It's a slow process, but it worked for me. And what I found out was as I did the 100 words a day, my average would go up quite significantly to the
Yeah.
point where my average was around 450 a day. And
Good.
that was just me spouting off and getting things down. So it's just that act
But it's
of
like, you see,
writing.
you're working the muscle. That's what you're doing.
Exactly. Exactly.
Working the muscle, and when you work the muscle as though you were lifting weights, or it's the muscle gets stronger and is
Yep.
capable of withstanding more stress, I'll call it.
Exactly. 100%. And well, the thing about Hemingway standing up is kind of interesting. When I was still I used to work on the pier out here for the boats at the shipyards, and it was intriguing that a lot of my ideas came from when I would walk the pier and do my rounds. And so I always carried a notebook on me because occasionally I would have a thought, write it down in my notebook real fast, put it back in my pocket, and go do my job. Oh, I got an idea. Got an idea. And it was just interesting how that happened. I want to talk real quick about I know you're just getting this book out, but do you have any other books in the making?
I have nothing that I'm working on specifically at the moment that
Okay.
say, but there's an idea that I have had. It's been kicking around for a while, and it is a novel about with the main characters being Mao Zedong and Michael Jackson.
Oh, okay.
And it's
Interesting.
about it also would be, I think, as it's kind of roughed out in my own head about identity and
Mhm.
authenticity,
Yeah.
which seem to be concerns of mine, you know.
Themes, interesting themes. Oh, there was a question I wanted to ask you before we were talking about your love of fiction. Did you find that as you get older, because I'm finding this, that fiction, while I enjoy it deeply, I'm finding I'm leaning towards nonfiction more often.
No, I'm not in the same position.
Really?
I still, given my druthers, I prefer fiction.
I love
And
it. That's
the
cool.
reasons is that I mean, if I'm not writing, and I mean, I have other parts of my life,
Yeah,
and I spend a good deal of time before the computer, and I mean, that's all. Well, I mean, you could argue that the real world is the biggest fiction of all, I suppose. But I mean, in other words, I've read about Donald Trump and war in the Middle East and Ukraine, and until it's coming out of my ears,
that's true.
and so fiction is an escape in the best possible way,
Yeah.
and a release in the best possible way,
Hmm.
and takes me to and the most important part of it is and takes me to a better place,
Hmm.
to a more positive place, to a place where there's a possibility to grow, to learn, and ultimately to transcend.
Yeah, I love that. So you said your book isn't quite out yet. It'll be out March.
Yes. So
March.
we're going to launch. That's the publishing verb that they use. We're
Yes,
going
it
to
is.
launch as though, and I could see a big rocket, and the book's on top. Anyway, but we're going to. With the book will come out
Okay.
in March, roughly 2 months from now, and will be available then. It'll be on Amazon, of course.
Yeah.
It'll be available through your local bookstore, as they say, through the main distributors of titles. Ingram is a major distributor. Readers
Yeah.
don't need to know that, but that's the way it works. I understand, and
Yep.
other distributors, and so Barnes and Noble will have it, and local bookstores, and which should all be supported, by the way. Uh,
Yes, I agree.
and
Yes.
so yes, it'll be available then. Yeah.
That's awesome. Cool. So that'll be in the next couple months. That's fantastic. I'm sure you're stoked, super excited to get that out there and just
Excited, nervous. I mean, it's a gamut of emotions.
it so is. And you go, and I don't know about how you were, but I went through waves of just sheer excitement and joy and
Terror.
absolute terror.
Oh yeah.
I want to pull this back in.
I know that one. Yeah.
Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, no, you did. You did fine. You've read it 1,400 times. You've had editors read it. You've had other people read it. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard, but
I mean, it's like giving, I mean, this is a cliche, but it's true. It's like giving birth.
yeah,
And
that's what
giving
I've heard too.
birth, as I gather, I mean, it's not an experience I'm ever going to have,
No.
except figuratively like
Yeah.
this. Giving birth is not easy. It's full of pain and struggle, and
Uh-huh. I've always called writing books making a brain baby.
yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's, that's right.
It because it does hurt. There's times where you're like, why do I put myself through this? Why do I like doing this?
I do this. Yeah, yeah,
What
sure.
is wrong with me? And then I do, and then I get in that flow and I read something of mine that I'm like, dang, I wrote that. That's really good. Like when you're impressed with yourself, like, not, all the humility on there, not patting yourself on the back kind of a thing. But when you're like, this is well written, this is well thought out, this is quality stuff. That makes me it's like, oh, kind of breathe some confidence back in when you're feeling a little,
I mean,
knocked down.
sometimes you read your own stuff. I mean, I've done some readings of excerpts from the novel that will be used, for marketing purposes, and that will be that are going to appear on the website, on my own website. Sometimes, in doing that, I kind of discovered my own work,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
thought,
Isn't that
hey,
weird?
that's pretty good. That
Yeah.
really flows. That's what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
That's the most important thing, that the product met my expectations. It fulfilled the goal that I had. And
Yes.
it's not always the case. There are sections where I mean, if you want, you could edit something forever,
Oh my
uh,
God, you can.
forever. I mean, and never quit. But you can't do that. At some point, you have to say, this is as far as I want to go, as far as I can go, whichever one you choose.
Yeah.
And I need to give it to the world, let the world respond, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. You
Um,
have to let out to the world. When is good enough? When is it good enough?
but
And like you said, there's always going to be an issue with it somewhere, or a comma or a word you could have used better, or a sentence could have
this
tensed better.
paragraph is shaky, or that sentence could
Yeah.
be better, et cetera, et cetera. You know, but what I will say is, and I try to remember this, that I'm not always successful in internalizing it properly. But somebody, and this is also a cliche, I suppose. The perfect is an enemy of the good.
Yeah.
As a creator, it seems to me you always have to remember that,
Yes.
because if you try to make it perfect, you're probably going to fail
Hmm.
and be unhappy in the process,
Yeah.
and hold back things that ought to be out in the world, even though they're not perfect.
Right. I heard a buddy of mine say it, and it was actually it resonated with me. He said, "I aim for perfect, and I expect to hit excellence,"
Yeah,
is what he said. I was like, that's pretty spot on, because we all know perfection is unattainable. It just is. And everyone has different theories or thoughts of perfection. But as long as you can hit excellent, you can make the reader go, wow, this is great. This is fun. Stir up some emotions, let them leave their body for a little bit.
right. Yeah,
You've done a good job, or tell a good story. That's the whole point of this.
that's
So
what you want. You want them to be able to go on a trip, and you took
yeah,
them there. You
yeah.
know,
And it's a cheap trip too, which is great.
it's a cheap trip. That's
I'm a
right.
frugal guy. I like I like frugality. Books are cheap. Stories are cheap. The amount of money I have to spend for a book, I get hours and hours of entertainment and joy. So, and hopefully you guys will enjoy his book when you go get it when it comes out in a couple months. So, I'm looking forward to that. And you said you have your own website too.
I do.
And what
www.steveschlam.com.
I love it. And I love what you said way back when people were calling you Steve Smash.
Yes, I had that's a long story, which I won't tell you
Yeah,
right now.
yeah.
I had a kid, and I was teaching for a little while, and I had a kid, and my everybody mispronounced my name, and they've been doing it since I was born. But
I love your
this
last
kid
name.
used to call me Mr. Smash.
Yeah, that's so cool. I heard Schlam, like, what a kick-ass last name. Slam the door, slam the window, do anything. Anyway, I won't keep you too much longer, but Steve, this has been real fun. Thank you for coming on here. I'm glad we can finally connect. I know we've been trying to get this figured out last couple months, but
And it's been my pleasure. I thank you for having me.
yes, my pleasure too. And then as we go down the road to more author fantasticness with your career here, your joy, your passion with stories, and year goes by, you got another book coming out, or you know what, you just want to rehash some more stuff about your current book and how things are going. I would love to extend an invite for a future interview.
That's very nice of you, Ryan. I will remember that and be in touch.
Excellent. All right, guys. I really hope you'd enjoy this. I know I did. Please go out, be on the lookout for his book coming out in March of 2024, only a couple months away. So I hope
The
you enjoy this,
harvesting
guys.
of Haystacks Kane.
Harvesting a Haystacks Cane. Thank you. I didn't want to butcher it. I was like, "Ah, I'm going to screw this up." So thank you for rehashing that for me. So the Harvesting of Haystacks Kane, go get it. March 2024. Be on the lookout for Steve Schlam. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed everything here. And as always, stay mighty and keep reading. Are you an author? Do you know someone who is? If so, then message me, Ryan Oliver, at ryanmoliver.com to set up a free appointment to discuss being showcased on the Mighty Books podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to the Mighty Books YouTube channel and share the link to this and more episodes with your friends and family. Thanks for listening. So long for now. Stay mighty and keep reading.